There have been many infamous Redditors throughout the years, many of which become known for doing horrific things or leading us down rabbit holes that get stranger the deeper we go. But there is one account at the center of a large conspiracy that stands out among the rest. The account of a user who went by the name Maxwellhill. And at one point, they were believed to be one of the Redditors with the most karma on the entire platform. But despite being one of the biggest power users on Reddit, Maxwellhill suddenly vanished in late June of 2020. Naturally, this caught people's attention, and before long, users began digging for answers, only to find themselves falling into a rabbit hole that led to one disturbing question. Could the person behind Maxwellhill have actually been Jeffrey Epstein's closest associate, Ghislaine Maxwell? But before we dive in, this video is sponsored by our channel members, who get access to the uncensored versions of the uploads, no ads, and exclusive channel emojis. You can also help sponsor the videos by clicking the join button. Every tier has access to the same member perks, so don't worry about which tier you choose. It's entirely up to you. And lastly, a bit of a disclaimer. I have featured this user in a previous deep dive episode, which I will link in the description. However, in light of the release of the files, I thought I would revisit this story in its own special episode with updated information. So with everything finally out of the way, let's dive in. This video is not going to be about Jeffrey or his crimes aside from a small recap. There's already tons of videos out there about him. We are going to focus on Maxwellhill's activity and the likelihood of this account being owned by Ghislaine. Also, in an effort to avoid the algorithm suppressing the video, I will be referring to Jeffrey as JE from now on. Alright, Maxwellhill created their account on March 12, 2006, and as of the time of this recording, the account is listed as being active in some of the largest subreddits on the site, some of which include r/law, Ask Reddit, Christianity, and politics. They are even still listed as a moderator in the World News sub, despite the long hiatus, and currently have over 15 million Reddit karma. But oddly enough, Maxwellhill has not posted in over 6 years. The last post was an article link about Bitcoin on the r/technology sub, and it was uploaded on June 30th, 2020. Before the sudden pause, Maxwellhill posted multiple times a day on many different subs, and did this consistently for around 14 years, very rarely missing a day. And while we could spend hours going through the post history, I'll save everyone the trouble and let you know that most, if not all, of Maxwellhill's posts are simply links with little information about themselves, if any at all. So how did the internet come to believe that this account was owned by Ghislaine Maxwell? If for some reason you don't already know, Ghislaine and JE allegedly met in the 90s through Ghislaine's father, Robert Maxwell, a wealthy publisher and alleged master spy. Not long after Ghislaine and JE met, the two got together and went on to commit various crimes. Together the pair used their wealth and social connections to silence their victims, blackmail their co-conspirators, and even avoid going to jail. But their luck did eventually run out. In March of 2005, Palm Beach police began to get reports from victims who were reportedly underage, which JE had been paying to give him massages, leading to an investigation and his eventual first arrest in July of 2006. Somehow, JE managed to work out a deal with Alex Acosta, the DA in the Southern District of Florida at the time, who let JE serve his sentence at a prison that let him leave during the day to go work. Ghislaine had seemingly avoided any form of punishment at this time, at least until she was arrested on the 2nd of July in 2020, around 14 years later, and almost exactly 1 year after JE had been arrested for the second time on July 6, 2019, before taking his life on August 10th a few weeks later. Ghislaine was sentenced to 20 years in prison on charges of sex trafficking minors, and at the time of this recording, she is currently in prison, but has transferred to a minimum security prison in Texas in November of 2025. Reportedly, she is currently seeking a pardon from the United States President Donald J. Trump. Now that we're all caught up on Ghislaine and JE, we can start connecting the dots. Let's get the obvious one out of the way. The username, Maxwellhill, includes Ghislaine's last name, Maxwell, but this seems too on the nose. So let's look at what the internet has dubbed their smoking gun, Maxwellhill's post history. Maxwellhill was practically a spam poster, and as stated earlier, they posted multiple links to multiple subs throughout the day, and were well known in the largest subs. Because of this, manually searching through each post would take an incredibly long time. Thankfully, there are websites that make the investigating a lot easier. Let's start with their final post from June 30th, 2020. Coincidentally, it's only 2 days before Ghislaine was arrested, on July 2nd. If this was actually her account, then it's possible that Ghislaine was notified a short time prior to her arrest that it was going to happen. This isn't something that's uncommon, especially for the wealthy class. Not to mention, JE had previously been arrested and took his own life the year before, in what was one of the largest news stories worldwide, leaving justice unserved and the public demanding answers. It's fair to say that Ghislaine was already expecting an eventual arrest and had lawyers on standby ready to inform her of anything that was going to happen within the legal system. This could explain Maxwellhill's sudden disappearance, and is the most brought up piece of evidence that the internet refers back to when claiming that Maxwellhill is actually Ghislaine. But we're going to look a little deeper into the account, so let's go back to the beginning. This is Maxwellhill's first post. The post itself is a link to a Guardian article posted directly onto the original Reddit sub. From here, it's the usual link posting every day like clockwork, until we get to July 22nd, 2006. Interestingly, we can see that there is a gap in posting from the 22nd to the 27th. Prior to this, Maxwellhill had seemingly never missed a day, let alone 5. July 23rd, 2006 is the day that JE got arrested for the first time. Now, for some reason, it's very difficult to find the exact date, but I was able to find it by using an article from July 25th, 2006 on the Palm Beach County State Attorney's Office website, mentioning the arrest happening on the previous Sunday, which would be July 23rd, 2006. Maxwellhill goes back to posting seemingly every day, at least from what I could tell in my time scrolling through their profile. This time, we're going to jump over a decade later to July 6th, 2019, which is when Maxwellhill stops posting again. This time, it's only for 1 day, but it also happens to be the day that JE was arrested, July 6th, 2019. So, I wanted to check out one last date just to be sure. The day that JE took his life, August 10th, 2019. And for the third time, Maxwellhill stopped posting. This time it was for 2 days, but it's getting clear that there was a pattern here. The posting gaps line up too well with JE's timeline. However, we still don't know much about the user themselves, so we're going to dive into their comment history. I must admit, this is the first time I read a Paul Graham article, and I think it's very good. I never did enjoy my job very much, despite the good pay and perks. I guess I was more in love with the money, which sort of blinded me from wondering about how much I liked the job. I quit my job and took some time to further my studies instead, and that wasn't easy either. I didn't enjoy the assignments, but since the course took a chunk of my savings, I plodded on. Eventually, I began to enjoy the case studies and got my degree. For someone who posts as frequently as Maxwellhill, they hardly comment at all, though there is a series of comments that I did find interesting. This is a post on the Reddit sub by a user by the name Ninzi, in which they link an article to the Times Online. The article is titled, Ephebophilia. It's today's word, and it matters. The article goes into how ephebophilia, or attraction to post-pubescent adolescents, is different from pedophilia, the attraction to children, and in my opinion, appears to defend separating the two classifications. To quote the article, "The reason for the revulsion felt for pedophilia is not just sympathy for the trauma suffered by the child, nor a judgment of the abuse of imbalanced power, even though both are real enough. It goes deeper. It goes to the defiance of a law of nature, whereby to have sex with somebody who has not reached sexual maturity is to have sex with somebody who is, if you will, not ready. By contrast, to have sex with somebody who has passed the age of puberty is merely to defy a law of man, and a pretty arbitrary law at that. I won't be going into the article much further, as I had to read it multiple times to be sure I was getting the correct message from the author, but it will be linked in the description if you want to check it out yourself. We will, however, include this section. A lad in Dover with a girlfriend of 15 may not have his wicked way, but if they hop a ferry to Calais, they'll be fine. Meanwhile, in some American states, not only may you have sex at 13, but you may marry at the same age, allowing for the theoretical absurdity that a man could marry in, say, New Hampshire, but should he bring his bride to Old Hampshire for their honeymoon, he could be imprisoned for statutory rape. Back on Reddit, Maxwellhill would quote this section in a comment on Ninzi's post. Meanwhile, in some American states, not only may you have sex at 13, but you may marry at the same age. 13 years? The mind boggles. Ever have a teenager? There are times that marrying them off seems like a perfectly reasonable way to get them out your house. More seriously, these laws are holdovers from simpler times when you were for all practical purposes an adult then. As a female, you'd probably spent several years already with a significant role in taking care of the younger children and the home. As a male, you probably had spent as long doing the work of your father, possibly even been apprenticed. It's not like Squire Boone's kids were hanging out texting at the mall. Maxwellhill responded back with this. Out of curiosity, do you or anyone know which other American states, apart from New Hampshire as stated by the author, still entertain these laws that allow 13-year-olds to marry, etc.? A user by the name Unit Mike would respond back to Maxwell, linking a website with all consent ages from all over the world, and then in a second response, provided more information about the United States, to which Maxwell replies, "Great, thanks Unit Mike. A quick browse for the US shows that for Ohio and New Hampshire, the age of consent is 13 years, whereas for Iowa and West Virginia, it may be as low as 12 years. I may be wrong in my interpretation of the different conditions. As we know, J.E. and Ghislaine's victims were known to be underage girls, and while we may never know the full scope of all of the victims, what we do have documented could technically classify him as an ephebophile. And just to be clear, just because somebody is asking about ephebophilia online, it doesn't mean that they themselves are doing anything of the sort. They could genuinely be curious or even appalled that it is even a thing. However, when put into the context of the Maxwellhill conspiracy, it seems to only add fuel to the fire. What's so strange about this conspiracy is that while none of the evidence points could be considered concrete evidence, they all seemingly, in one way or another, tie in to J.E. and Ghislaine Maxwell, which makes it incredibly hard to debunk. There is a comment where a Redditor refers to Maxwellhill as a man. However, Maxwellhill does not confirm or deny their gender anywhere on the account. I still felt that it was worth the mention though. Vice has even posted an article about the conspiracy in which they call it evidence-free, and even report, "This has led to an extreme amount of attention and harassment against the actual U/Maxwellhill, who has been linked without evidence to a known associate of a convicted pedophile who was just arrested by the FBI." Another well-known Redditor described the user to Motherboard as just some guy. U/Maxwellhill's fellow moderators on the r/World News subreddit have reported the conspiracy theories to Reddit's corporate admins. Reddit has seemingly not taken any specific action to stem the conspiracy theories at this point. They even include a conversation from Maxwell and a fellow World News moderator. "Yeah, I logged on a couple of hours and saw all this shit in my PM," U/Maxwell said in the conversation. "Quite fun actually, but conspiracy theories are by nature toxic, otherwise they wouldn't attract readers." While they do not provide the screenshot of this conversation, Vice is reputable enough to believe that they had seen some conversation. However, take everything with a grain of salt. That being said, if this is all a case of mistaken identity, then I feel for Maxwellhill. But why not simply prove that they're not Ghislaine? They don't have to reveal their actual identity, as there are other ways to prove that they're not her, maybe even by simply posting, she is in jail after all. Reddit is also one of those places where a story like this becomes internet history, and while they would likely still get the occasional crazies in the DMs, I truly believe that overall, the Reddit community would help clear their name. So to just disappear off of the face of the earth, especially from an account as big as that, doesn't make much sense. But maybe they simply didn't want to deal with any of this, and I can fully respect that. Ultimately, there isn't any definitive proof that this account was owned by Ghislaine Maxwell, or that she used it to influence the internet and take over Reddit. But there are just too many coincidences to rule everything out completely. So many things seem to point towards Ghislaine being the person behind the account. As of the time of this recording, Maxwellhill has still not posted or commented since June of 2020. Ghislaine is still in prison and is set to be released in 2037. That is assuming that she doesn't get the presidential pardon. Though if she somehow manages to get released early, there is a possibility that we might see Maxwellhill come back online. We'll just have to wait and see. But I want to hear from y'all. Could this account actually be Ghislaine Maxwell's? Or is this an extreme case of mistaken identity? Let me know down in the comments. And before I go, if you made it this far, leave a like, and check out my other channel, Cold Coffin Reads, for more Reddit stories. Uploads are also available on Spotify, but most importantly, as always, thanks for watching.